All right, so we're going to be looking at questions 60 to 65 in this video. Base your answers to questions 60 to 62 on the diagram below and on your knowledge of earth science. The diagram represents drill core samples, from two different locations, 1 and 2. A drill core is a cylinder of rock material removed from the bedrock. Letters A through J represents different rock layers. Some layers contain index fossils. The rock layers shown have not been overturned. So it says for number 60, identify the geologic period where rock layer A was deposited. So what page are we looking for to find the geologic period? We know that we're looking at page 8 and 9. Now there's something here that lets us know what period rock layer A was deposited. So what do we see? We actually see an index fossil, right? We see an index fossil. Now, what page do we also look to find index fossils? Page 8 and 9. And so when we go to page 8 and 9, let's keep scrolling. Page 8 and 9, I see the same type of fossil located right here, and it's index fossil B. If you want to take a comparison look again, you see this is the index fossil here, and we look at B, it's the same. So we know index fossil B is what we're looking for. So when I look, I see that index fossil B is located right here, right? It's the second to last row before the black bolded line. Remember that pages 8 and 9 are connected. So when I keep going to my left and I see where B is located, when I scroll to page 8, right, second to the last column before the black line, we see that we're looking at the period section right here because it asks for the geologic period. And when you check your own reference tables, you'll notice that the second to the last line is the Ordovician. So your correct answer for number 60 is this word right here, Ordovician. That's a geologic period. All right. Let's look at number 61. 61 says list the relative ages of rock layers D, E, F, and G by listing the letters from oldest to youngest. So we know generally that the layers on the bottom are older and the layers on the top are younger. However, we need to know what is the connection between location 1 and location 2. There is a location. And remember when we talked about what makes a good index fossil is if you have the same fossil on each row and you only have one. So one of the same patterns in rock layers that I see that are exactly the same is B and I. So I know that B and I are the same rock layer. I can't assume that for D only because of the fact that it's much more eroded, right? It's much more eroded and not the same length. So I know the best rock layer that I can use to date is B and I definitely going to be one and the same. Now it gives me a much more accurate way to determine what's older and what's younger. One of the things I notice, right, because we're looking at D, E, F, and G, I know that D and E is going to be below this rock layer, and F and G is going to be above this connected rock layer. So now I can do from oldest to youngest. Oldest to youngest now. So what is below this connected rock layer here? I see E, so it'll be E first because it's the most at the bottom, then D, and remember they're connected, right? And so therefore, now I'm looking at these two here, and G, and then F. And that is your answer from oldest to youngest, E, D, G, then F. And it's all because you have to find the rock layer that connects these two. Once I found that these two rock layers are connected, the same type of rock, same type of unconformity, same distance, right? Same width from each other. I know these rocks are the same. I can then use this connected rock layer to accurately date the others. All right, let's take a look at number 62. So number 62 states, identify which two processes that form the unconformities in these drill cores. These lines right here are unconformities. And if you remember when we learned what causes these unconformities, what causes a sudden shift in the patterns, right? Remember, in order for an unconformity to be created, right, we know that you're removing old rock layer, right? You're removing partially old rock layer, and then you're depositing new ones. So some of the two main ones that is included in creating an unconformity is erosion and deposition, for sure. Some of the other ones that you could have included are mentioned right here. So you could have said uplift emergence. You also could have said weathering, right? Breaking down the rock, erosions, submergence, subsidence and sinking, deposition, sedimentation, precipitation, and burial. All of these would be acceptable processes as well. Notice we didn't say anything about faulting, right? We didn't say anything about faulting. So all of these are acceptable answers and could be acceptable answers anytime that the question is asking what would have possibly created an unconformity. Let's take a look at 63. So 63 states, basic answers to questions 63 to 65 on the graph below and on your knowledge of earth science. This graph shows the discharge of the Delaware River at Barryville, New York for a 1-week period during March 2004. Remember, discharge talks about the amount of water that passes through a given area. So when we see that there's a higher discharge, that means that there's even more water that is passing through a particular area, right? More water that could be passing through a river or a stream or on a given area. All right. So identify the date shown on the graph where the river was most likely carrying the greatest amount of sediment. So here is the relationship. All right. Here's the relationship. If you have more discharge, then that means the amount of sediment that you can carry also increases as well. It also increases as well, right? If you have more discharge, that means the greatest amount of sediment that you can carry increases. And it makes sense. If there's more water that's passing through an area, you can carry even more water, even more sediments passing through a given area. So what date has the most amount of discharge? And it is March 11th. So your correct answer for number 63 is March 11th. All right, let's take a look at 64. So 64 states, state one possible cause for the increase in stream discharge on March 15th. So throughout the day, right, the discharge was decreasing, and then something happened during this day that caused the discharge to increase. What can cause for a river to allow for more water, or a stream to have more water to pass through a given area? Well, the better question is, what can account for you just having more water in general? All right. If you stated precipitation, that is perfectly fine, right? Allowing us to get more water. If you said there was a rain shower, which increases more water, snow that melted in that area, right? Because if snow melts, you could have more water, increase runoff, right? Remember, runoff talks about the increase of water that passes, that doesn't infiltrate. Flooding occurs in the increase in the volume of water in the stream. All of these would be acceptable. All right. If you said an increase in water velocity, that would be incorrect. So basically, all of these responses attribute to just you having more water added to the stream. And number 65. So number 65, it tells us, oops, sorry. Number 65, it tells us the Delaware River flows out of the Catskills and into the Atlantic Ocean. Identify the general compass direction towards which the Delaware River flows along the Pennsylvania-New York State border. All right. So one of the ways that you could have found this, they tell you that the Delaware River flows out of the Catskills and into the Atlantic Ocean. Where have I seen the landscape Catskills before? What page of the reference tables? Well, if you take a look, and we see the Catskills is located right here, right? And we know that the Catskills is located right here, and they're saying that somewhere along the river, somewhere the river goes from the Catskills to the Atlantic Ocean, right? What compass direction am I pointing towards, right? If all this represents the Atlantic Ocean, it's pointing southeast, right? Another way that you could have found the answer to, knowing that you know that the river flows from the Catskills to the Atlantic Ocean, is if you also look on page 2 of the reference tables. On page 2 of the reference tables, it even shows you, it tells you in the question right here, it tells you that it flows along the Pennsylvania-New York State border. So if I look on the Pennsylvania-New York State border, which is right here, the Delaware River, right here, this is the Delaware River, right? And remember, we said that it flows towards the Atlantic Ocean, right? So therefore, the Atlantic Ocean is located right here. So the river, to empty itself out from here to the Atlantic Ocean, your direction is going to be southeast. And so that is your correct answer. All right, for number 65. The reference tables, they would have allowed for you to say southeast or south for the Regents. You could have said that. Or south, southeast. It's completely up to you. Any of those options would be fine. Stay tuned for the other video for the rest of the answers.